All right, so today we're going to dive into something really interesting, something you might not have heard before.
Oh, this would be good.
We're going to be looking at Jesus's early life
Okay.
and using this really interesting religious education curriculum as our guide.
Cool.
Yeah, so, everyone knows the Christmas story, right? The manger, the shepherds.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, but we're going way past that today.
Okay.
We're exploring those kind of lesser-known events from his childhood that really give you a whole new perspective on who he was.
I like it.
Yeah, and I think you'll like this too. This curriculum uses these really cool interactive activities and historical context to really bring the events to life,
It's awesome.
It's really cool. It's not just like reading a list of facts.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Our first stop is the dedication of baby Jesus.
Okay.
And this is found in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verses 22 through 32.
All right.
So this takes place 40 days after Jesus' birth.
Yeah, Mary and Joseph, following Jewish law, they take him to the temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
And it's actually like a ritual purification.
Right. A baby boy had to be dedicated at the temple 40 days after birth.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? This wasn't just like some quick ceremony. This is deep-rooted in their faith and culture.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
During the dedication, an elderly man named Simeon, and the Bible says he was guided by the Holy Spirit,
Wow.
approaches the family, and Simeon takes baby Jesus into his arms and makes this prophecy about him.
Okay, hold on, prophecy. This sounds intense.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
What did he say?
He says, and I'm quoting here, "For my eyes have seen your salvation."
Whoa.
Now imagine hearing that about your baby.
I know, right.
This suggests that Simeon understood, and likely Mary and Joseph, being devout Jews, understood that their son could be the long-awaited Messiah.
The deliverer.
The deliverer.
Wow, talk about a life-changing realization.
Right, and he doesn't stop there. He goes on to say that you have prepared in the sight of all peoples. And this brings in like a whole other concept.
Okay.
Salvation for everyone, not just the Jewish people.
Yeah, that was a pretty revolutionary idea back then, right?
Oh, absolutely. The focus was really on God's chosen people, Israel.
So this little baby destined for something way bigger than anyone could have imagined.
Yeah, and then Simeon finishes with, "A light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel."
Right.
This really reinforces this belief that Jesus was destined for a global impact, that he was the Messiah.
Pretty amazing.
The curriculum actually points out that word Gentiles here, it means non-Jewish people.
Yeah, that makes it so much clearer.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes we forget that those listening may not be familiar with some of those terms.
Right.
Okay, so this prophecy is packed with meaning and foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Anything else happened during the dedication?
Yes. The curriculum points out this small detail that's actually really revealing about Mary and Joseph's economic situation.
Okay.
They offered 2 turtle doves or pigeons.
Hmm.
This was the offering permitted for those who couldn't afford a lamb, which was the typical sacrifice.
Okay.
So it paints this picture of a very humble beginning for this extraordinary life,
Yeah, sometimes the smallest details are the most revealing.
Right.
Shows that Jesus, even though he was the Son of God, he was born into humble circumstances, just like many people.
Absolutely.
All right, so that was a powerful first event.
It was.
You ready for another incredible story from Jesus' early life?
Absolutely. Hit me with it.
Okay, let's move on to the dramatic story of the visit of the Magi.
Oh, yeah. The Magi.
These mysterious figures who traveled from the east, following a star, to find the newborn king.
It's a classic.
It always captures the imagination, right?
It really does.
Yeah.
The story is found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 15.
Right.
And to fully appreciate this event, it's really important to understand who the Magi were and the historical context surrounding their visit.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah.
So who exactly were these Magi?
Well, think of them as wise men, scholars, probably astrologers or astronomers.
Okay.
They were highly educated, and they studied ancient prophecies and celestial events.
Yeah.
And get this, they likely traveled over 900 miles.
900 miles.
900 miles, which would have taken several weeks.
Wow.
All because they saw a star they believed signaled the birth of the King of the Jews.
That's dedication.
Right.
They undertook this epic journey based on their faith and desire for truth.
Exactly. They were seeking something extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now, imagine this journey taking place during the reign of King Herod the Great.
Ooh,
This guy was notoriously cruel and paranoid.
Yeah.
Even killed members of his own family to hold on to power.
I know.
So hearing about this new king would have been a huge threat to him.
I can't even imagine.
Right.
They must have been terrified of Herod.
Oh, absolutely.
That adds a whole other layer to the story.
Right. So Herod, cunning as he was, summons the Magi. And he pretended to want to worship this newborn king, but secretly, he planned to kill him.
That's sinister.
Right.
Herod was willing to go to any lengths to eliminate any potential rival.
Oh, yeah.
So what happened next? Did the Magi fall for his trick?
Thankfully, no. The Magi were warned in a dream not to return to Herod.
Oh, good.
So they wisely chose a different route back to their own country.
Smart move.
And an angel warns Joseph
Okay.
to take Mary and Jesus and flee to Egypt for safety.
Like a high-stakes escape mission.
Exactly. It shows just how far Herod would go to protect his power.
It really does.
And it highlights the danger that Jesus faced even as a baby.
Right. A very dramatic start to a life that would change the world.
No kidding.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
We got this prophecy pointing toward Jesus' extraordinary destiny.
Right.
And then this dramatic escape from Herod.
It's intense.
What an intense beginning to his story.
It really is. And these early events are just the beginning.
I bet.
They foreshadow the incredible journey that lies ahead.
This is already so fascinating.
It is.
Now I can't wait to see what happens next.
Oh, then we'll move on to our next event.
Okay, bring it on.
This one takes place a bit later in Jesus' life.
Yeah.
Takes us to when Jesus is 12 years old.
Right.
So picture this. He's with his family on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and somehow he gets separated from his parents.
Oh,
Every parent's worst nightmare, right?
yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They eventually find him in the temple.
Okay.
Not just wandering around,
Okay.
but deep in conversation with the religious leaders, the teachers of the law.
The 12-year-old.
A 12-year-old holding his own in theological debates.
That's amazing.
It is. The curriculum points out that this would have been around the time Jewish boys would visit the temple, like a year or two before their bar mitzvah,
Oh, okay.
which is, like a coming-of-age ceremony at age 13.
Right, right.
So it was a chance for them to kind of familiarize themselves with the rituals and teachings.
That makes sense.
So Jesus was kind of participating in this tradition,
Okay.
but he wasn't just observing, he was actively engaging
Wow.
and demonstrating a deep understanding of Scripture.
That's incredible.
And when his worried parents finally find him, Jesus says something that really underscores his unique nature and his awareness of his purpose.
Okay, what did he say?
He says, "Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?"
Oh, man, that line always gives me chills.
It's powerful.
Even as a young boy, Jesus was aware of his special relationship with God.
Yeah, it's this really powerful statement, isn't it?
Yeah.
It reveals so much about his identity and his sense of mission.
Okay, so we've gone from a prophecy about his future,
Right.
a dramatic escape,
Yes.
and now this incredible display of his knowledge and connection to God.
Yeah.
Where do we even go from here?
Well, before we jump into more events, it's important to remember that despite these extraordinary experiences, Jesus also had a normal childhood.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the extraordinary stuff.
Right.
But he was also a kid.
Absolutely, who grew up in a small town.
Right.
So there's this line in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, verse 52, that just sums it up perfectly. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man.
Such a great verse.
It reminds us that he developed in all aspects of life,
Yeah,
just like anyone else.
right.
I love that. Makes him so much more relatable,
Yeah, it does. And the curriculum actually encourages us to reflect on our own growth and how we can learn from Jesus's example, even in his childhood.
That's a good point.
It's not just about the stories themselves.
Yeah.
It's about what we can learn from them
Yeah.
and apply to our own lives.
Exactly.
So are you ready to delve deeper into these fascinating events and maybe discover even more insights?
Absolutely. Let's do it. Okay, so we were talking about how Jesus, even though he was the Son of God, still had a normal childhood.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you think about it.
It is. It really makes you realize that he understands the human experience
Oh, totally.
in all its fullness.
Speaking of those early experiences,
Yeah.
I kind of want to circle back to the story of the Magi for a minute.
Okay.
There are just so many layers to that story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I feel like there's more to uncover there.
For sure.
Okay, so we talked about how the Magi were these wise men, possibly astrologers,
Right.
who traveled this long distance following a star.
Yeah.
But what about the gifts they brought? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Right?
Those always seem like such strange and specific gifts to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What's the deal with those?
It's easy to kind of overlook the significance of those gifts, but they were carefully chosen
Okay.
and packed with meaning.
So what was the deeper meaning behind those gifts?
Well, each gift had a symbolic significance.
Okay.
Gold, of course, was a precious metal,
Right.
fit for a king.
Okay.
It acknowledges Jesus' royal status, his position as the king of the Jews.
Right. Gold, classic symbol of royalty.
Exactly.
What about frankincense?
So frankincense was a fragrant resin
Oh.
used in religious ceremonies,
Okay.
and it represents holiness and divinity.
Okay.
So by giving frankincense, the Magi were acknowledging Jesus' divine nature, his connection to God.
So they were recognizing him as both king and deity.
Yeah, both.
It's fascinating. And what about myrrh?
Yeah,
I remember that being used in burial rituals.
exactly. Myrrh was a spice used for embalming the dead.
Right.
So it's a bit of a somber gift, but it actually foreshadows Jesus' eventual death and resurrection.
Wow, that adds a whole new layer of meaning to the story.
Right.
It's like the gifts themselves are telling a story predicting his future.
It's almost prophetic, isn't it?
Totally. It's like these gifts, along with Simeon's prophecy, are kind of weaving together this huge tapestry of Jesus's life and purpose.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Speaking of weaving together the story, it's worth taking another look at the historical context of the Magi's visit,
Okay.
particularly in relation to King Herod.
Right.
Remember, this was a time of great political unrest and paranoia.
Oh, yeah. Herod was not a guy you wanted to mess with.
Not at all.
He was ruthless.
So ruthless.
And you can just imagine his reaction to hearing about a newborn king.
I know, right?
It would have been a direct threat to his power.
He probably saw it as an instant challenge to his authority.
Oh, absolutely.
No wonder he wanted to eliminate any potential rival.
But exactly, and that's why the story of the Magi's visit is so dramatic, you know?
Yeah.
It takes place against this backdrop of Herod's cruelty and fear,
Right.
which adds this real sense of danger and urgency to the whole situation.
It's easy to read these stories and just see them as ancient tales.
Yeah.
But when you think about the real-life political climate at the time,
Yeah.
it makes everything so much more intense.
It really does. It reminds us that these events weren't just happening in a vacuum.
Right.
They were unfolding within a very specific historical context.
Right, so it's not just about the stories themselves.
Right.
It's about understanding the world that they were happening in.
Exactly. And it's that historical context that adds this depth and richness to our understanding of Jesus' life and mission.
Okay, I'm really seeing the bigger picture here.
Good.
We've got these prophecies hinting at Jesus' extraordinary future,
Yeah.
a dramatic escape from Herod, highlighting the dangers he faced even as a baby,
Right?
and then these symbolic gifts from the Magi that foreshadow his ultimate destiny.
You got it. And those are just the events from his infancy.
I know, it's
It's
crazy.
a lot to unpack.
It is, from just the first few years of his life.
Yeah.
Now I'm even more excited to explore what comes next.
Well, then let's move on to the next event in our deep dive.
Okay, let's do it.
This one takes place when Jesus is a little older,
Okay.
and it really showcases his intellectual curiosity and spiritual depth.
Ooh, tell me more.
This story takes us back to the temple in Jerusalem.
Okay.
Remember earlier we talked about how Jewish boys would visit the temple like a year or two before their bar mitzvah?
Right, it was like a trial run to get familiar with the rituals and teachings.
Exactly. Well, this event takes place during one of those visits.
Okay.
Jesus is 12 years old,
Okay.
and he's separated from his parents during the Passover festival.
Oh no, lost in the temple.
I know, right?
I can't even imagine.
Every parent's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
They finally find Jesus not just wandering around lost, but sitting among the teachers of the law.
Wait, he was engaging in deep theological discussions with the religious leaders.
Yes.
At 12 years old.
At 12 years old, he was listening intently, asking insightful questions,
Wow.
and even amazing the teachers with his understanding.
That's incredible.
It is.
It shows a level of intellectual maturity and spiritual depth that's kind of astounding for a 12-year-old.
Yeah, it really does. And when his parents finally find him, imagine their relief and amazement.
I bet.
So his mother, Mary, says to him, son, why have you treated us like this?
Yeah.
Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you.
You can hear the worry.
Yeah, totally.
And maybe a little exasperation in her voice.
Absolutely.
I've been there.
Yeah.
And Jesus' response is really interesting.
It is.
He says to them, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?
Powerful line.
It's such a powerful line.
It really is.
It's like he's stating his true identity
Yeah.
and purpose even at such a young age.
And the curriculum points out the significance of the phrase, my Father's house.
Oh,
You know, it's not just referring to the temple building itself,
okay.
but to a deeper sense of belonging, a connection to God.
You know, it makes me think about those times in life when we feel most connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah.
Whether it's through faith or nature or art or something else.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like we find our own Father's house in
Yeah.
those moments.
Beautiful way to put it.
I think we all long for that sense of belonging, that connection to something greater.
Absolutely.
And for Jesus, that connection was clearly rooted in his relationship with God.
No doubt.
Okay, so we've got this prophecy, the dramatic escape,
Yeah.
the symbolic gifts,
Right.
and now this profound statement about his connection to God.
Right?
It's amazing to see how all these early events are shaping his identity
Yeah.
and foreshadowing his future ministry.
They really are. It's like we're watching the seeds of his ministry being planted in these early experiences.
I love that imagery.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah, what other insights can we glean from these early events?
Well, I think it's important to remember that these events, as fascinating as they are, they're not just isolated stories. They're all interconnected,
Okay.
and they point toward a larger purpose.
Okay.
They're part of a bigger narrative that unfolds throughout Jesus' life.
I like this. How do these glimpses into his childhood shape our understanding of him as an adult? How do they connect to the person he becomes and the message he shares?
That's a great question, and one that I think we need to explore further.
All right, let's do it. So we're talking about how these early events in Jesus' life, the prophecies, the dramatic escape to Egypt, the deep conversations in the temple, they weren't just like isolated incidents.
Right. Exactly.
They were all shaping him, pointing towards something much bigger.
Yeah, like each event is a brushstroke in a much larger painting.
I like that.
And when you step back
Yeah.
and look at the whole picture,
Yeah.
you start to see how all those early experiences kind of influenced his ministry and his message.
Okay, I love that analogy. It really helps paint a clearer picture.
Good.
So let's break it down.
Okay.
How do those specific events connect to the person Jesus becomes
Right.
and the message that he shares with the world?
Okay, well, let's start with that really poignant detail from the dedication ceremony.
Okay.
Mary and Joseph offering 2 turtle doves instead of a lamb
Right?
speaks volumes about their economic situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really shows that Jesus wasn't born into privilege or wealth.
Right.
He was born into a humble family that struggled to make ends meet.
Yeah. Exactly. And that experience, you know, growing up in humble circumstances would have absolutely shaped his worldview
Right.
and informed his compassion for those who were struggling.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
He wasn't preaching from a place of detachment.
No.
He understood what it meant to be poor, to face hardship, to be on the margins of society.
Precisely. And that understanding is so clearly reflected in his teachings.
Yeah.
His compassion for the poor and the marginalized.
Right.
His message of inclusivity and social justice.
So that early experience of poverty kind of planted the seeds for a ministry that would champion the needs of the poor and the oppressed.
Exactly. It's this powerful reminder that our experiences, even the challenging ones, can really shape our values and our purpose.
Now, thinking back to the story of the Magi and that dramatic escape to Egypt,
Right.
it's easy to focus on the adventure of it all. But that experience must have had a profound impact on Jesus, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Just imagine being a young child,
Yeah.
forced to flee your home,
Right.
seeking refuge in a foreign land.
Scary.
It would have been a traumatic experience,
Yeah.
filled with so much uncertainty and fear.
For sure.
And it makes me think about, the millions of refugees around the world today
Yeah.
who are facing similar situations,
Right.
fleeing war, persecution, violence.
It's a harsh reality that sadly hasn't changed much over the centuries.
Yeah, it really hasn't.
But it connects directly to Jesus's teachings about compassion, hospitality,
Right.
welcoming the stranger.
I see that now, having experienced displacement himself, he would have had such a deep understanding of the plight of refugees and immigrants.
Absolutely.
It makes his message of welcome and compassion all the more powerful,
It's not just an abstract concept for him. It's
Right.
something that he lived through.
He gets it.
He understands it on a personal level.
Now, let's not forget that incredible scene
Yeah.
of young Jesus in the temple engaging in those deep theological discussions with the religious leaders.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a striking image of his intellectual curiosity
Wow.
and spiritual depth.
It really is. I mean, remember, he was only 12 years old.
I know, it's crazy.
And yet he was holding his own in conversations about scripture and theology with some of the most learned men of his time.
It's unbelievable.
It shows this extraordinary level of understanding and this willingness to challenge conventional thinking.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if that early experience, that confidence in engaging in those deep discussions might have influenced his approach to teaching later on.
Oh, interesting.
He wasn't afraid to question authority,
Yeah.
to challenge those traditional interpretations, to push people to think differently about their faith.
That's a great point. It's like that early experience in the temple gave him a taste of what it meant to engage in thoughtful debate.
Right.
And to challenge the status quo.
And that boldness, that willingness to question
and
to provoke becomes a real hallmark of his ministry.
Excellent.
He wasn't just repeating old ideas. He was introducing a new way of thinking, a new way of understanding God's love and grace.
Exactly. And that's what makes his message so enduring and relevant even today,
Right.
He invites us to engage with our faith
Yeah.
on an intellectual and a spiritual level, to ask questions, to seek deeper understanding,
Right.
to never stop learning and growing.
Man, this has been mind-blowing. We've gone from looking at these events as individual stories
Yeah.
to seeing them as these interconnected pieces that shaped Jesus' identity and foreshadowed his ministry.
And I hope our listeners have had a similar experience,
Yeah.
It's amazing how these early chapters of his life, often overlooked or glossed over,
Right.
reveal so much about the person he became
Yeah.
and the message he shared with the world.
Absolutely. It's like those early experiences, even the challenging ones, were preparing him
Right.
for the extraordinary mission that lay ahead. They were shaping him into the compassionate, courageous, and thought-provoking leader he was destined to become.
Beautifully said. It reminds us that every chapter of our lives,
Yeah.
every experience we have,
Yeah.
can shape who we are
Right.
and the path that we take.
It's so true.
It's a powerful invitation to kind of reflect on our own journeys.
Right.
And to see how even those seemingly insignificant moments can have a profound impact on our lives.
It's like we started this deep dive looking for insights into Jesus' early life.
Right.
But we ended up discovering something even more profound.
Yeah. What's that?
Insights into ourselves, our own journeys of faith, and the power of experience to shape who we become.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a reminder that the journey of discovery is never truly over,
Yeah.
There's always more to learn, more to explore, more to understand
Right.
about ourselves, about the world, and about the divine.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this incredible deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an enlightening journey, and I can't wait to see where our next exploration takes us.
Likewise, until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking truth.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.
We'll see you next time.